warm welcome to Political Economy with Shweta Punj. This week, we are taking up the issue of mental health. If there's one story that's dominated the headlines and dominated our mind space, it has been the letter written by Anna Sebastian's mother, a young 26-year-old girl who was working as a chartered accountant in a reputed firm and who allegedly died because of stress. She suffered a heart attack and she died, and her mother, in the letter, has detailed the ordeal of that child, of that young girl, as a professional. I'm calling it an ordeal because of the way it was described. It was clear that the hours were very long, and Anna was anxious. Anna's death has raised many questions. This is not the first time that we've seen a young person succumbing to a heart attack. However, the circumstances leading to it is what is very disconcerting. Since then, one has come across so many stories of such young people who have opted to end their life or who have indulged in uncharacteristic behavior of violence, very sharp violence. Just this morning, I read about an IIM Ahmedabad student who killed himself by jumping off a building because he just was very, very stressed out. In the same page, there was another story about a 15-year-old boy who stabbed his father because his father wouldn't give him the car keys. These incidents portray a very disturbing picture of India's youth. India takes pride in its demographic dividend. But the world today, the India of today, is very different from the India of, say, the 70s, 80s, or even 90s. Young people are coping with multiple pressures, they are exposed to a lot more, and somewhere they are finding it difficult to cope. What can we as parents and what can we as organizations do to ensure that our children feel heard, seen, and they have the ability to cope with the real world challenges? Is there something that we are doing wrong? Is India's hustle culture pushing our youth to die by suicide? Well, I'm hoping to get some answers to these questions. What can we as parents do? What can we as organizations do? What is it that we are doing wrong? What are the lessons that are there for us from other countries that India must look at? To discuss this in greater detail, I'm joined by two very special people who have spent a lot of time in understanding the mental health landscape for India's youth. Please join me in welcoming Neha Kripal, founder of Amaha Mental Health, and Astha, co founder of Reboot Wellness. Thank you so much, Neha and Astha, for joining us. What is it that we are doing wrong that's pushing our young people to to take such extreme measures, or pushing our young people into such conditions or into such spaces where they end up suffering such serious heart problems? Let me begin with you, Neha. You were talking about the kind of clients that you get where workplace stress has become a very dominant theme. So let me just get a sense from you on what is it that young professionals are experiencing at this point, and what is it that the organizations really need to be mindful of as they grow and expand, they bank on young people to make their companies grow?
Thank you, Shweta, for picking up this important question and really sort of nudging why this is happening and what is the role and responsibility of organizations and individuals across the clients that we work with at Amaha, and also otherwise, when you hear from other fellow founders, you recognize that the problems are becoming more and more extreme. and more prevalent, widespread. People are talking about it more, and therefore rising to crisis very quickly. And so, organizations who previously worked with us for psychology support are reaching out for psychiatric support, for medication, for interventions, and for crisis support in suicide prevention, management, and handling trauma and grief thereafter. Right. So it's really important to recognize that right from workplace burnout and sort of the reduced resilience and extreme amount of distractions and challenges, whether it's digital, whether it's substances, whether it is the kind of lifestyle, everything from climate to pollution, frankly, and the busyness of our road systems is playing a role in creating the sense of panic and anxiety, in the life that we live in today. And then you add to that the sort of fractured sense of self, this sort of identity crisis that a lot of people are going through, and feeling that they need to it's a rat race for validation, for recognition, for growth. All of these are really compounding people's mental health challenges and getting them to a break point faster, and in a way that they need help, and without that kind of help, it's very difficult to cope on their own. So, leaders across organizations, right from founders and board members to managers, all need to firstly take responsibility to support those who are already in express distress, but also to build in sort of early intervention and support systems to minimize the distress. And those are preventative measures that organizations absolutely must be thinking about. And we see it across the board in our clients at Amaha.
Right. So, so you raised some very significant points. One, that climate change, pollution, the crazy roads of our cities are adding to the stress, and then the point about fractured sense of self. We'll come back to that. I want to also bring in Astha. Asta, just a little while ago when we were chatting, you were talking about how the young people are struggling with expectations. And I think that ties in with this fractured sense of self. Are we burdening our children with expectations? Or is it that they are burdening themselves with expectations because of how wide their world has become now?
I'll answer this question in two parts, right? One is, as a practicing therapist, there's one very significant thing that I've seen, and I'll concur with what Neha had said earlier about how people are, earlier when people came in for mental health support, psychological support, or therapeutic support, are now extending to psychiatric interventions and crisis intervention and other things. And the one major reason for that is the overstimulation of our brains and of our minds that is happening today, because of all the reasons that Neha suggested earlier, and also because there is this pressure of expectations. Now, the pressure of expectations is self and environment driven. It is coming from self because each of us is more aware, and more, we have more information, we know what's going on, and we're closer to comparing ourselves with a wider audience than just the next door neighbor's kid, and that puts a lot more pressure. It invites a lot more information, which again overstimulates the brain. The capacity of the brain is not equipped to handle and deal with this kind of stimulation. And then there is also the expectations that come from the environment to hustle, to the glorification of hustling culture, which we see all around us in different ways, in subtle and very direct ways as well. The importance of succeeding, all of this put together adds a very heavy burden on the psychosocial understanding of growing up in a society and in an environment that we are experiencing today.
So, is this situation unique to India? And this is my question to both of you. Are considering we are an aspirational society, we there is this hunger in young people to succeed. That the world is in front of them. Do you think that this whole burden of expectations is more so because these children are coming from different backgrounds and they feel that they pressurize themselves into becoming high achievers because of what they want to accomplish? Or is it the same in very prosperous countries like the Scandinavian countries or even in the United States? Neha.
Shweta, that's a great point, because often we wonder, how do we label a problem, how do we scope it, and tag it to either a country or a demographic or a kind of organization or maybe an industry segment. So I think when it comes to mental health challenges and all these questions that we're raising, this is a global problem and no country has solved it. Having said that, there are cultures and societies and environments where children are being born and raised in a way that tend to be happier, more peaceful, less stress inducing, less overstimulation factors that Asad mentioned and others, and are just geared towards a more where the being and the sense of self is as important as the doing and showing up in the world for the success milestones that one is chasing, right? And so there are countries who are perhaps doing a better job at that than others. But if you think about those on the fast track, when we think about sort of this high capitalism, consumerism, this digitally addicted world where we're spending anything between sort of 8 to 14 hours a day on the phone, and our retention time and our attention span has gone down drastically, we have to recognize that you cannot identify one single source of the problem. These are cultural issues, these are social issues, these are societal issues. I mean, the challenge of mental health is a biopsychosocial challenge, right? It is in the biology of, as we're born, in our genetic sort of makeup, it is in our early childhood and our experiences, what we are hearing, largely around human conditioning, right? After all, children are born in this world expecting to be loved and cared for without any milestones or success, right?
Condition.
So I think there is something
Yeah.
about the way society shapes itself and projects the needs,
Mm.
onto the next generation, that expectation builds, and their sense of self becomes contingent on that, right? And so we have to look at what are the social and cultural norms and locate mental health challenges in in that wider setting and not make it an individual's problem, because we will never be able to conquer this if we think about it as one individual to the next. It is something that we have to look at systemically and across the socio-economic, political, cultural environment of any country that is hoping to understand how to deal with this crisis.
Hmm. So, any countries, Neha and Asta, that have done better in this, in raising their kids in more resilient and more happy, environment, that they come out to be more self-sufficient and not needing the kind of external validation that that we're seeing right now.
A few decades back, it used to be India, but I think that's changed,
That's
and
right.
most
Yeah.
Scandinavian countries have sort of taken have come into the discussions around happiness quotient, and the again, what Neha said, it's the cultural as well as the systemic change that is required. It cannot be done in isolation. Mental health is the existence of mental health is social, cultural, biological, behavioral, environmental, all of this combined. So the solution also lies in that. It requires a systemic and a social change, awareness, acceptance, understanding, with its cultural impacts and influences, because culture is different in different countries and different geographies, and the political scenario that is playing out in across the world today. So I think these are also very
Right.
significant factors that impact when we look from a global perspective.
Right. Let's talk about culture. When you mentioned that a few decades ago, it was a country like India. We had a joint family system. So it was difficult to really isolate yourself or sit with your thoughts for too long. Somebody would always push you into having a conversation, or, you would have people that you could relate to or confide in within that family setup. But over time, we've seen disintegration of that and rise of a nuclear family setup. Plus, there's been an exodus of stimuli because of the whole digital world. Um, so I want to bring in Neha also on this. Neha, when it comes about, when it comes to building a culture, building an environment, for instance, even in organizations, right? There'll be organizations that will do better in building a culture, say, of failure, of acceptance, of creativity, innovation, where you feel comfortable. And then there is a culture which is very hostile, which can be toxic, and so on. So, how I'll talk about a workplace culture. What do you think organizations do wrong? Where are they going wrong when it comes to building, or nurturing a toxic culture, as was pointed out in Anna's mother's letter? I think that was a very telling. It was a very telling letter, and I think what she pointed out happens in a specific organization. I'm sure there are several organizations in India that are guilty of that.
Yeah, it goes back to the point of realizing how intrinsically embedded and systemic these challenges are, right? Organizations, individuals, leaders, our entire response to anything that is so deep rooted is to just react when there's a crisis, right? Or try and respond to some need that has already emerged. But the challenge is to recognize where this is coming from. This is not about this letter and something that has come to the fore now. There is a reason why this is caught like wildfire across the country, because it is the unsaid challenge, it is the unsaid, unexpressed trauma that people have been experiencing for a long, long time across organizations, right? So this is not a one off. We know all the statistics around employee mental health and the level of crisis. And so I wouldn't necessarily go into that. But I think what we have to realize is that we have to look at the midterm and long term solution for this. And that really comes from understanding what is causing these challenges in the first place, right? People need to be able to eat,
Hmm.
people need to be able to sleep, people need to have a routine, people need to have a sense of community, they need to have a sense of recognition and appreciation and connection, a sense of belonging with where they're working, right? And a sense of positive validation. Now, when you think about the corporate environments today, and especially in some sectors, are set up for exactly the opposite, right? It's about hustle, it's about speed, it's about proving it, it's about meritocracy based on late nights. And so the cultural sort of triggers are exactly the opposite. Now, which one organization can say, I will make that change? I think it's about collectively organizations and leaders sort of pledging to recognize what these systemic challenges are and really coming together to say, how are we going to look at a cultural overall? Because while we may get more returns on investment from an employee's work hours today, but we're actually causing more harm to ourselves as an organization and to our employees for the mid term if we don't put these corrective measures in place.
Hmm. Okay. Let me come to you, Asta. Asta, how severe is the problem right now? And is there a certain age group that we are looking at that feels very vulnerable, that feels completely pushed to the wall? Are you thinking about the young adults and the early professionals in that age group? How severe is it? What are the kind of issues that have come to you?
I think COVID changed the landscape for mental health very significantly for multiple reasons that we've been discussing today. The the landscape of how mental health is perceived has changed, but that has also brought in a lot of hypersensitivity to mental health and mental health concerns. So on one side, the kind of concerns that we're getting, earlier I have this discussion so often with my colleagues and people that I interact with, that 15 years back, 16 years back when I started practice, we would hear of one-off case or one-off, and it would be so exciting for us to hear of one-off cases which were, severe, where there was ADHD, there was a mention of bipolar, etc. But now every second, third, fourth cases are diagnosable cases because they have such significant impacting consequences of the environment and the society that people are living in. There's such strong there's such strong symptoms, as we call it, that we see in people today. There's such high level of dysregularity, dysfunctionality. There are a lot of unhealthy practices that are happening. Social connections are falling apart, and there's a lot that we see. The dysfunctionality is making it all very disorderly, which goes to say that people are shifting from a reactive, regular, response to a mental health or a stressful challenge into a more clinical
Hmm.
concern, right? So that is one big shift and change that we have seen consistently, specifically from after the COVID times. And one more thought that came to me earlier while Neha was also talking was, the last 4 5 years have been so, as a whole, human species has been very there's been a lot of unrest in the world in the last 4 5 years with COVID and all the political changes, the wars, and everything that we are hearing. One is that it is actually happening, and two, we're all being bombarded by it also very regularly and very consistently, and that is being reflected in the behaviors and stressors of individuals today. We can visibly see as practitioners how all of these things are impacting people in the way they connect with themselves, in the way they connect with their work, in the way they connect with their society and people around them. And though that
So, Asta, let,
disorder.
let me just.
Hmm.
Hmm. Right, right. No, just finish your
Shweta, can I
thought.
just
Finish your
add to
thought,
that?
please. Yes, please. Let Asta finish her thought, then please come in and do add to it. Asta, just finish your thought, please.
Yeah, so I mean, basically, what I'm trying to say is that there is so much more shift from, if you look at a mental health spectrum, it goes from being healthy to being completely unhealthy. But in between, we have other stages as well, which is being a healthy mental health is when someone is, able to adapt to life challenges in a healthy manner. They're able to regulate themselves, which we all do anyway, because life is going to be full of challenges. Then there is a reacting space where our there's an impact, significant impact and impairment on our ability to function. But as we keep going towards the red side of the spectrum, the impairment keeps
Hmm.
increasing. And unfortunately, it used to be a bell curve, and that's what we were taught in college as well, that it's going to be a bell curve, and majority of the population is going to lie in the middle, where people are going to be more reactive, and people are going to be they're going to have challenges in dealing with mental health. That is what we were taught. But I see the curve bending more towards the right, going to the other the other end of actually having
Hmm.
clinical concerns which need addressal.
Wow. Neha, yes, please come in.
Yeah, I just wanted to contextualize the generation question. I think that comes up often, and we say that the older generation
Yeah.
had more resilience and had more capacity to cope. The younger generation gets burnt out very quickly. They want a mental health day off very quickly. I think it's about recognizing that
Hmm.
your initial years of your life are very formative, right? They set the pattern and tone of your
Hmm.
own development and your relationship with the world, and often we then cyclically repeat that, and so therefore in that generation, we're in our 40s, but there are, the generations that are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, they lived in a world that was less triggered, less stimulated, and less exposed, and therefore their initial years were sort of far more predictable and stable. Now, the minute you bring in things like COVID, I mean, these are one of the most peaceful times we're living in from a geopolitical perspective. And yet, when you bring in the uncertainty that illnesses like COVID have at a global level, suddenly you're
Yeah.
sending sort of all your predictable social structures into shock. And so, for a lot of young people today, and those who are being born, in the 2000s and here on, are really sort of right from the get go, even before they've been able to form a relationship that is based on some of the solid foundations. They are already, there is a sense of fracturing, there's a sense of mistrust with oneself and with the world at large, right? And so, to your question about the
Hmm.
challenges we're seeing younger and younger people burning out faster, feeling great difficulty with stress. We have to recognize that this is not a mental health problem, because physical mental health cannot be separated, right? We are in the same body, and the mind
Sure.
body connection is that one is triggering the other. So whether it is autoimmunes, whether it is cancer, whether it is cardiac problems, hypertension, diabetes, everything has a mental health relationship to it, right? And postpartum,
Hmm.
all tragedies, losing someone in the family. Most employers have a 3-day off after you lose a family member, right? I mean, so just imagine where is the allowance to actually stop and grieve? Where is the allowance to deal with traumas or a backlog of traumas that you may have had, right? And then there are crises
Yeah.
and difficulties that are built into your day-to-day life. And so, for a lot of young
Hmm.
people, we are seeing those challenges. Then there is the exposure to substances, whether it's drugs or alcohol or digital addiction or pornography, or you're seeing much more and more extreme forms of hostility to oneself and to others, which is playing out then in
Yeah.
crime, right? And we're seeing those cases all the time. On the one hand, people ending their life earlier, and many more people. I mean, just to put it in context, India has one third of the world's suicides, one third of the world's addictions, one third of the world depressed. And if we're saying one in every four people will have a mental health challenge in the course of their lifetime, that means three other people are the caregivers to that person if they're not directly dealing with it. So there isn't a single home and a single team and a single organization in the world that isn't actually touched by these, right? And yet our level of
Hmm.
acknowledging them, our proactivity in dealing with them is really what the question is. How can we build those frameworks? How can we build that understanding and acceptance? And then how can we change culture in a way that we understand what is
Yeah.
causing these challenges so that we can fix for the long term?
So let's, that's the next part of this conversation. I want to talk about what can parents do? What can families do to build a safe environment for children to come and talk to us in case they need something. I'm a parent, my son's 11, and whenever I see such stories, or it just, this is exactly what you think about, that are we, whatever we are doing, is it the right way to go forward? And the world is not as simple as what it was when we were growing up, right? So in terms of exposure, in terms of triggers, there's just a lot out there that you cannot predict or you cannot control. So Astha, first over to you on, what can families do to ensure that children are as mentally prepared to deal with failures, to deal with setbacks, and to are able to manage their emotions in the right way as they step out into the real world.
So I think what we require is prevention, precaution, and cure. Preventive measures, precautionary
Mm,
measures, and curative measures when required. And for that, what we need is to move from information to knowledge. Right now, there is a lot of information.
mm.
Everybody is talking about mental health. You open Instagram and you're flooded with, people sitting and making a lot of comments, or a lot of, passing on a lot of information. But I think one thing that needs to be done, which is to shift that information into knowledge which can be sort of culturally and socially comfortable to digest by that sector, or by that family. So that's one, which requires school
So
intervention,
break
which
break this down,
requires.
Asta, break this down for us. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by knowledge, and breaking it down for a family? What does that mean?
Information means that I know stuff that's going on, right? Knowledge means that how does that relate to me. So how does that relate to
Yes.
me in my family environment, whether I'm living in a nuclear family or a joint family, whether I'm from A part of the country or B part of the country, whether I come from a traditional or a modern home, or a urban, or a rural setting, or we have tier 2, tier 3s. There are so many factors that impact, and we've been discussing all of those. So the first thing to do is to shift that information into knowledge. Have knowledge that helps you understand the mental health makeup, the physical health makeup, the well-being makeup within your system. And that requires, and I say this a lot, that requires schools, education institutes to start. It needs to start from there. It needs to start from whether you're a government school or any educational institute, where the child gets its corresponding education from. One is from home and the other is from school. So schools can provide a lot of space to convert information into knowledge, right? So that is one. Two, and
Give
these
me
are
an
preventive
example,
measures,
Asta.
right? For example, you go to a school in the rural parts of the country, or even you go to school run by an NGO, a government school, where you have children of the drivers and the maids and the staff coming there. Now there you can't sit and talk about stuff that we talk about in at a Pathways or a Basant Valley. It's different context. So there we need to talk about, and we do this, right? We go and talk to them about, we educate parents about substance abuse, we educate parents about addiction, we educate parents about violence, we educate parents about abuse. They don't know these things. For them to beat up their child is it's a very common practice. They need to do it. Their survival is, they're at a very different, their needs are very different from the needs that of a an urban population. So it needs to be customized and absorbed by a different population. Which is why it needs customization. But if you go to a Pathways, the same topic of addiction or substance abuse needs to be expressed and dealt with differently, right? I don't mean to specifically point out on any institutions, but I'm just, for namesake, I'm
Sure.
sharing the names. But that's the thing. We need to first, if we're talking about mental health, if we're talking about societal impact, then we need to shift that into a capsule which is absorbable by that particular population, relevant to that particular population, because half of the people don't think that it's relevant. Why should we talk about hum pagal thodi na hai? Why should we talk about mental health? We don't need to talk about mental health.
Mm.
But we need to first understand what mental health means to me in my context, right? So I think that's the
Okay.
starting point. Schools have a huge
Mhm.
role to play in this. Schools are spaces to help children also build skills to deal with life that comes, in the like, to be emotionally regulated, to be psychologically flexible. These are very basic human skills. These are very basic life skills that all of us require to live the life that we're living. And because there is such a rapid change technologically and socially and environmentally that's happening in the world around us, it puts a lot more pressure and emphasis on having those skills being being taught in, in school settings, in home settings, because that's where the parents and families will also, we can't go to each parent and each family and say that you need to know about all of this. It's,
Right,
it's like
right.
how polio got eradicated.
Hmm.
It's like the
Okay,
same thing. We
sure.
needed a few Amitabh Bachchans to come and talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Neha, I want to bring you in here on, what can families do? What can parents do? What can the ecosystem around you do? What can we do as parents and caregivers to our children on, preparing them for the world that they're going to enter?
Yeah. And Shweta, I'm going to say something that is going to be the least popular and perhaps the hardest to do, right? Which is that it's not about what we should do, it's what we need to stop doing, right? It is about the
Okay.
undoing,
Yeah.
right? Because the whole point is, as our dear colleague and family therapist Dr. Shelja Sen always says, childhood is not a preparation for adulthood, right? But what has happened is that parents of today, leaders of today, managers of today are always out to try and make a success of everybody at the earliest possible, fastest way possible, right? And that is a projection of our fears. It is our insecurities, it is our fear, it's our shame, and what I've often read as fear of shame that leads us into this very triggering rat race kind of lifestyle. So we need to ask ourselves as adults, what is it that we can stop doing, right? If you look at the psychology of a child, of a newborn, and in their first 5 years, 10 years, children are not born to be troubled and make trouble, right? So let's just recognize
Hmm.
the innocence of life here, right? And recognize that it is our collective role as leaders, as people who have influence in community, and as parents. I'm a parent to an 11-year-old, and I'm a caregiver to a parent with a mental illness, right? And I know that the main problem on behalf of the children of the world is to really say, parents, look at yourself, look at your expectations, look at the classes you're putting us in, look at the tuitions that you want us to do, look at how quickly you want us to write our SATs and prepare for exams for university, look at why it is important for us to get into a certain university, why is it important for me to get into a PwC or Ernst& Young, why is it important for me to make senior partner, right? How much I'm going to be praised amongst my siblings and amongst my friends if I have the biggest paycheck and the biggest car the fastest possible. That is really the question, right? So it is absolutely not about the doing, and most certainly about the undoing, right? And the more we do that, the
Yeah.
challenge with that, and the reason this is an unpopular narrative, is because then we have to take responsibility to work on ourselves, right? It's very easy to say, let's fix the
Yeah.
children, let's fix the system, let's fix the organization. But the minute it comes home and says, actually, I need to relook at why I am the way I am as a leader or as a parent, right? Where are my insecurities and threats and fears coming from? And how can I not project them onto my children? I think that is really giving them a chance to be who they might be wanting to be, and give them a life that is at least their own without creating a handicap, which is what adults today are doing for their
Hmm.
children.
So we are
I just
overparenting.
want to add
We are
something here.
overparenting. Yeah.
We don't think we are over parenting. I think we need to reparent ourselves. I think we are overly obsessing
100%.
over trying to fix our children, right? And trying to
Yeah.
sort of make them into star performers, right? Where it is no longer about the human being, what that child actually is, what is their purpose and ambition in life, or the lack of, right?
Yeah.
How much importance is happiness given? So if you look at India on the happiness score globally, we're right at the bottom, right? And this is a statistic where India really needs to recognize, where we're at when it comes to happiness, when it comes to peace, when it comes to all of these factors. We are in a very, very compromised state because you need 100% to get into some of the good colleges in India, right? And
That's
and
true.
that's really the
That's
reality of today. So you could be amazing and you could be getting 100% on your board exams or on your SATs or whatever, but still not good enough because you're one of 50. So now you have to excel in other ways. Now you have to outperform, you have to run faster than the others. And those are challenges of countries like India. So we may have the largest young working population in the world, and therefore we have the biggest problem because we are going to have a young working population that is depressed, that is burnt out, that is anxious, that has addiction challenges, and that is feeling lost, and therefore moving to either self harm or harming other people. And that really is the India
So
problem
this is the,
today.
yeah, this is the flip side of the hustle culture, because not
Yeah.
everyone's meant or built that way to just do that hustle. So this is the flip side, because if you're not hustling, then you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing.
I think what I would just say is since we all tend to respond more to crisis and emergency and then be reactive, the warning sign is already here, right? People are killing themselves
Yeah.
faster and earlier in their life, and it's going to happen across corporate India. And this is a compounding problem that is only going to get worse month on month, not even year on year. And so, any corporate that is interested in looking at its own well-being, even in a 2 year horizon or a 5 year horizon, needs to prioritize this over anything else that is a sort of an outcome metrics. So that's what I would say in terms of the urgency and the immediacy of the problem. Over to you.
Hmm. Asta, Asta.
I was actually trying to answering to your earlier questions of what parents can do. There are three questions that I often ask parents to reflect on. Child rearing is about three things: the parent, parenthood, and parenting. Right. The parent is the person that you are.
Right.
So what Neha said, who am I as a person? Because that's going to come into the way I raise my child. So the parent that I am, parenthood means, what does parenthood mean to me? What does it mean to me to be a parent? Is it a tick in the box? Is it a societal expectation that I'm fulfilling? Or is it how my how do I relate to raising a child? And the third, which we focus on the most, unfortunately, is the parenting. What are the skills? What are the tools? What are the thought processes? What are the latest techniques that are there for parenting? Which is not so much, which is the result of the first two questions. Who am I as a person? What are my beliefs about parenthood, about being a parent, about raising my child, my beliefs about being myself, how much am I able to relate to myself, and then come on to the practices that I have for raising my children. So it's the parent, it's the parenting, and it's the parenthood.
Very, very important points. Okay, very quickly, some policy prescriptions. What would you like to see the government do in this? Like Neha pointed out, that you get 3 days to grieve the loss of a loved one. I didn't even know that, actually. And so, are we as a country recognizing that this is a crisis that's facing us? Do we need to put in policies in place which force the companies to build a culture where mental health is given the priority that it deserves? Neha.
Yeah, I think we're quite far off from that. I think we're still obsessing over the big statistics and numbers and realizing that this is an upward trajectory. But I don't think we've even started trying to figure out what to do about it. I mean, if we reference back to the 2017 Mental Health Act that decriminalized suicide and made a few other changes, that those were important steps. But I think there's so much more that we need to do. Partly it's about recognizing what causes these challenges and truly building in then the preventative framework, right? And it's not just a corporate problem, it's a social problem, it's a cultural problem, it's in our education institutions, it's in our colleges. So it's not just one institution or corporate life's problem, but it is about building in those measures. And there's a lot to be done. I mean, there's a lot to be done about looking at sort of creating safety in workplaces, about creating policies that are supporting whether it is physical abuse and molestation and other forms of discrimination, all the way to looking at living with a mental illness already that is a diagnosed condition. Are we allowed to discriminate based on that? How many organizations would hire somebody if they had upfront told them that they have a debilitating mental health challenge, they might need days off, etc. So it's really about
Right.
understanding the nature and widespread aspect of these, and then putting into place policies that nudge corporates or force corporates to really recognize the role that they need to play at a structural level, at a leadership level, and at a day-to-day management level, all of which needs to be done, and it's not even work in progress yet.
Absolutely. Asta, any countries that have taken this challenge head on? that India can take lessons from?
Um, I mean, there are lots of things happening all across the globe right now because it's a global challenge that people. I think Scandinavian countries, their what works in their favor is the size of their population. It's much lesser. The diversity is much lesser, so it makes it easier for those countries to implement policies and take on. I mean, it's so much easier, and that's what I keep harping on, that we need to have our knowledge basis our context. So borrowing from other countries is great, because to know that, to take inspiration that they are taking very, very specific, very structural steps to bring about changes in the way mental health is perceived and managed on a day-to-day basis, starting from, I mean, top down, down up, I mean, upwards, however, in all directions. But it needs to be customized to the Indian palate. It's high time that
Yeah.
India starts to focus on building these things on their own, as their own, keeping in mind their own population, keeping in mind their own social structure. That is, I think that's what we need to learn to do.
You asked about policy, and so I hadn't mentioned it, but actually, the main thing the government needs to do is to own the mental health problem. And what I mean by that is, today it is,
True.
we need a mental health ministry. There are countries like the UK that have a suicide minister. There are countries like Dubai that have a happiness minister. Given the size and scale of this problem and how multifaceted it is, we don't have a single accountable ministry in government that holds mental health. It's partly sitting under
Yeah.
health, partly sitting under women and child and social welfare, and partly I don't know where. And also psychiatrists are governed in a different legislation. The therapists fall under a different sort of regulatory framework, right? And most of the practitioners in this space are not following any regulation at all, and therefore there is no certification or
100.
quality regulation that is sitting in the sector. So we have a quantity problem about putting professionals out. We have a quality problem about actually looking at what they are practicing and where do they get their certification from, what kind of accreditation do they have. And then we have the problem of recognizing how care needs to be delivered and how they need to actually understand what people are going through. But the fundamental that the government can do is own it, to set up a mental health focus within either the health, or
Yeah.
to set it up as a separate mandate altogether, and then to recognize the cross sectional nature of this and its interconnection with gender, with education, and about 7 SDGs, which I think people don't realize and therefore don't interconnect, looking at it purely as a subsection of health. And of course, there is no importance of mental health gets 0.6% of the budget that physical health gets. And so that's just where it sits on the overall government health allocation.
Yeah. No, overarchingly, our health allocation continues to be very low. It's much lower than even Pakistan, actually, whether it's physical health or mental health. And let me tell you, in my conversations with the folks in the government, the first argument that you get is that you're a developing country and people need jobs. We need to, it's all about prioritizing funding. But having said that, I'll just conclude by reiterating what we've discussed today. The point is this, that we keep talking about a demographic dividend. But if we do not take care of this dividend will not be with us. And I think that's very important. India is facing a mental health crisis, something that we never thought would happen with us because, with so many other things to think of, roads nahi hai, potholes hai, jobs nahi hai, khana nahi hai, poverty kitni zyada hai. The point is कि these are the things that make headlines in our country, and rightfully so. These are the big issues that are facing us, but that does not mean that the mental health crisis, which I think the unfortunate death of Anna has brought to the fore. I think that this is the really the time for us to act, and we cannot ignore this anymore. Thank you very much, Neha, and thank you so much, Astha, for joining us with your insights. I think we had a very candid conversation, and that's what I was hoping for this conversation to be. So, thank you so much for taking up the time, and we do hope to continue this conversation on money control on this podcast. I promise this is not going to be a one-off thing. We'll keep talking about this, and we'll keep raising this. And Neha, I will take a suggestion to the ministry, to the government, on a mental health ministry or a happiness ministry. I like the name of happiness much better because I feel like I didn't even know that India is at the bottom of the happiness index. That's so, it's just, uh, there's so much that we need to do. And I do hope that we emerge wiser from this. Thanks so much for joining us, and to all the viewers who've tuned in to watch us today. Thank you so much. Do send us your thoughts and feedback on moneycontrol.com. Thanks so much for watching. We'll be back next week with a new issue and a lots more authentic conversation. Thanks so much.